This video is something very different here on my channel. I've been wanting to share a podcast for such a long time, but with the videos that I make here on YouTube weekly and also in my membership, as well as organizing a busy family with 3 growing boys, I just haven't had the bandwidth to get this podcast up and running. Throughout the year though, I have been having conversations with the most beautiful women from my audience about their stories of motherhood, of becoming a mother, of trying to conceive, of pregnancy, and all the challenges that go along with it. And I'm tired of sitting on those conversations and not getting them out to you to share. So I've decided I'm just going to put them here on YouTube to start with, and I'll work out the podcast thing later. So this first conversation is with the beautiful Izzy, who was just so amazingly open and vulnerable about sharing her experience of loss and of ectopic pregnancy. She also shares about how important it is to acknowledge how awful the experience of miscarriage is and to let yourself feel all those ugly feelings, and then also to hold on to hope throughout the experience. There isn't video for this episode. Many of the women that I talk to want to stay anonymous. The things they're sharing are deeply personal, and I want to respect that privacy. And also I think not sharing with video allows us to be a little more open, a little more vulnerable, and that's what I want these conversations to be. I hope you enjoy this first episode of In Circle. Welcome to In Circle, a podcast that I hope will feel like that comforting and uplifting feeling you get from sitting in circle with other women. Here we'll share stories and lessons about becoming and being a mother. We'll talk about heartbreak and joy and all the tricky bits in between. I'd like to start by inviting you to place a hand on your heart. Take a breath with me as we center in our own energy before we start. First of all, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. I know it can be vulnerable to talk about this sort of stuff. So if you could just introduce where you are in the world and maybe how you found me to start with.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Izzy. I am 29 years old. I am from the United Kingdom and I live in Manchester. And I first came across you, Bettina, almost a year ago now. I was reflecting on it just yesterday. I'm actually exactly a year into my TTC journey, and I came across you after my very first miscarriage. I was looking so desperately for kind of like support and a community. And during my first miscarriage, I just happened to go onto YouTube and just happened to type in yoga for miscarriage. And honestly, never in a million years I would come across anything, let alone community that you have. And that was it. That was the first time I started to practice and move my body under the very unfortunate circumstances, which was during a loss. But so grateful to have found you.
Yeah, well, that makes me so happy to hear. It's sort of not a space I ever particularly wanted to work in. I don't think anyone wants to have to go
No.
through that experience, but it's interesting now looking back and thinking, oh, maybe all of that was for some reason, because now I'm able to share from a place of, really
For
understanding, I
sure.
guess, where everyone else is at. Having found me is one thing, but being willing to share your story is another. So what made you willing to share today?
So I think a large part of it is really to do with my own healing journey. I think Izzy 3 months ago, 6 months ago, even 9 months ago, could never have thought of doing this because I couldn't even mention the word miscarriage without bursting into tears. So this is really like a testament to how far I've come. But also in those desperate times where I've been in my own bedroom crying, it's it's been
Yeah.
so comforting to hear other women, to hear people talk about their stories, whether that's through podcasts, YouTube, TikToks. It's been so comforting to hear other women talk about their experience, to remove the shame, and yeah, just to be part of, like you said, Bettina, a community that you never really thought you'd be a part of, but you are. So I think, yeah, for anyone that's listening that's going through it, I'm here with you.
It's certainly, not something you want to be a part of, but once you've gone through it on your own. And because I think in our real lives, we have such little access to other people, I think. Like people talk about it very
Mm,
briefly, but I found in my real life, there weren't people who I could talk at length with it about. And it sort of felt a
yeah.
bit like I felt isolated from other people. Do you feel a bit like that too at times?
Oh, for sure. I'm 29 years old, so I'm kind of at that cornerstone age where some friends are having babies, but then also I've got girlfriends who are like, it's not even on their radar, they're not even thinking about it. And it just so happens that in my immediate girlfriend group, I am the only one that's embarking on this journey. So I didn't have really any extremely close girlfriends that I could tap onto and say, oh, I know that you've been through this, or I know that you've had a baby. And even the extended friends that I do have haven't been through it. So you can't really get that true sense of empathy unless you have been through it. And actually, an amazing resource of support that I've had is my mum. My mum, unfortunately, her very first pregnancy was stillborn. And whilst our experiences are vastly different, she, as a mother, of course, has been
Yeah.
incredibly supportive, but also has experienced that pain of loss. And 40 years on, still carries that pain with her even now. And truthfully, I didn't even realize until her and I have had very in-depth conversations about it. But yeah, for sure, in my immediate circuit of network, I felt very, very isolated.
So if you're ready to, I would love to hear what it's been like for you, where it sort of all started and where you're at now, I guess.
Sure. So as I said, it was about a year ago that I started my TTC journey. I got married in the January of 2022, and one thing my husband and I were certain on was, let's get started. We want a family. We wanted to wait until the wedding was out of the way, and so we started. And with much joy, I got pregnant really quickly. I think it was within maybe 1 or 2 cycles I got pregnant. I fell pregnant in the March, and at around 6 weeks, I started to experience some quite severe cramping and spotting. Took myself off to my early pregnancy unit and sat there for, I think it was about 7.5 hours. I was the last patient to be seen in the unit. I was seen at about 7 o'clock in the evening by a lovely nurse who just said to me, we won't be offering you a scan because you're so early. And because it's the end of the day now, we also won't be offering you a blood test. But I'm almost certain that you're experiencing a miscarriage. And just sort of sent me on my merry way with a pamphlet about how to manage a miscarriage at home. And I was
How did you feel
absolutely,
at that point? Like to not be given a scan or a blood test at that point?
I honestly think the innocence of going into that for the first time, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what was the protocol, or what the level of care you should receive in that situation. So for me, I left the hospital like in a blur, like, whoa, oh my God, like this was the last thing I expected to be leaving with. I thought that they would, as they do a test, do a scan, and I'd be told, oh, don't worry, spotting is normal, you'll be fine. It was the last thing. So I think it was a state of denial, shock, and it really took me probably a day or two before the initial bleeding really started for me to feel devastated, really, really devastated. And when I look back now, and it's funny because that first loss was so innocent. It was so, oh, well, at least I got pregnant really quickly. Those people that I chose to tell, so my immediate family and my very close friends, all said the same thing. Izzy, don't worry, you're young, you got pregnant really quickly. I had so many people say to me, most people lose their first pregnancies anyway, so don't worry, this is normal. Maybe your body just wasn't ready for this pregnancy. What the hell does that even mean? And my doctor actually very kindly did run some initial tests for me, and that all came back normal, thyroid function, vitamin D, all those kind of key things they look at, that all came back normal. And she said to me, Izzy, actually, best thing to do is just to start trying as soon as possible. And I don't know whether that's actually a myth or not. And I'm sure you've probably come across this online as well, that there are some beliefs that if you try soon after a miscarriage, you're actually a little bit more fertile. So I, again, with all of the innocence in the world, took that advice and really didn't allow myself any grieving time, and became obsessive about trying again. And lo and behold, I fell pregnant again, nice and quickly.
Yeah.
Um, Went into this one, there wasn't even a small part of me that thought I would have another loss, because I thought I'd served my time. I've had my miscarriage. I don't need to go through that again.
I remember
Yeah.
feeling like, no, it can't happen to me. I've already done mine. Like,
Yeah, I've served my my loss duty that most women, 1 in 4 women, 1 in 3 women, whatever it is,
yeah,
goes through. It can't possibly happen to me again. But then the spotting started again, this time just after 6 weeks. It's a little bit different this time. It was met with a very unfamiliar discomfort and pain. Again, I took myself back off to hospital and I really thought I was just being neurotic. I thought, Izzy, better to be safe than sorry. This time around, you've got a little bit more knowledge and experience. You've got this history behind you. So I demanded a scan. I was told two pieces of information. Number one, my HCG was really low for where I should be. And number two, they couldn't locate the pregnancy. So one thing they knew for sure was that I was pregnant. The HCG was present in my blood, but they just couldn't locate the pregnancy. So again, I was sent on my merry way with a pamphlet called Pregnancies of an Unknown Location, which, I mean, whoever the hell created that
who
title,
wrote that? That's terrible.
it's like, what do you mean? Like, there's just a pregnancy lost in my body. What the hell does that mean? And then, unfortunately, over the course of the next couple of days, I did fall really, really poorly. I had basically all of the stereotypical symptoms of an ectopic pregnancy. So, on and off spotting, extreme pain on one side, that very odd shoulder tip pain, and I did fall really quickly in quite a short amount of time, and I was rushed to hospital. I reflect on it now, and I'm extremely grateful for the care that I received, because I was seen by an amazing gynecologist in our emergency room who really didn't take a second to decide what the most sensible course of action was, which was that I would need to have emergency surgery. My fallopian tube had, in fact, already ruptured, and I had quite severe internal bleeding across my bowel and across my kidneys, and right up to my liver. And that really, at this point, it wasn't a choice of what should we do or shouldn't we do. Mother comes first. So yeah, I was rolled down, signed my consent form to say, please take away whatever needs to be taken away, which was scary. And I was woken up with I guess in the grand schemes of things, relatively positive news, which was that they only had to take away my left fallopian tube. So my womb remained intact, my two ovaries remained intact, and my lovely, strong right fallopian tube remained there as well. So that was traumatic, to say the least. I can honestly say now, reflecting on that experience, that I suffered with PTSD for at least 6 weeks after that. It was incredibly traumatic. I think anybody that's been through an ectopic pregnancy, it's really one of the pregnancy losses that aren't spoken enough about. The urgency, the surgery, and then the loss of your reproductive system is so traumatic. You're grieving the loss of your pregnancy, you're grieving the loss of what could have been a potential pregnancy, the opportunity to become a mum, but then also you're recovering from surgery, and you've lost a piece of your womanhood, and nothing can prepare you for how utterly devastating that is.
Haven't had this experience at all,
Mm,
but I remember one of the feelings that came up in like, so once I was on to my second or my third, just feeling
mm,
like, are you kidding me? Like,
yeah,
why is this my luck? Like, why am I
yeah,
going through this again? So I can
yeah,
imagine for an ectopic, you've also got that, yeah, that added layer of, like you said, signing away potentially their right to take whatever they needed to save you,
hmm,
which is
hmm,
potentially signing away that future that you wanted for your family. And I can't even imagine how traumatic that would have been
yeah,
to wake up
yeah.
and be like, well, what happened?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's like all I wanted was to start a family. Why am I being tested and punished like this? You know, I've gone into this experience with the innocence that so many families go into, which is just to start a family. And this hasn't just happened to me once, it's happened to me twice. And now I've gone through this and I've had to have surgery and I've lost a part of my body. What does this mean? And also, why? And I'm sure you experience this yourself. Why? Why is this happening? And I think, again, I came out of that experience having had a multitude of different tests, and it all came back with the same thing: is you're really healthy, there's nothing wrong with you, this is just bad luck. um, I still find that such a bitter pill to swallow, because this is more than just bad luck. what
Yeah.
what the hell is going on here? And at that point, and I think in Australia you have a similar healthcare system to us. I'd been going through our National Health Service, who, for the most part, despite being, massively underfunded and under resourced, they had been amazing and I'd got all of the care that I had needed. But by this point, I was desperate for answers. And I think desperate really is the word. I became obsessive with researching, eating a certain way, you know, quitting alcohol, doing exercise that will help me get my optimum level of fitness. And I decided to reach out to a private consultant who had come recommended to me. And I spoke to him, and the very, very first thing he said to me, sorry to get emotional, was
No, never apologize for that here.
he said, Izzy, I'll do my best to get to the bottom of this for you, but there's one thing you have to commit to, and that is hope. You have to have hope that one day, no matter when it is, you will become a mother. And that was probably about 2 weeks after my ectopic pregnancy. And it has been the most useful piece of advice that I've ever had, because it's true. Without hope, there really is no point. And I still didn't know what lay ahead of me. I didn't know that I would go on to have a third loss. But that statement just has stood with me ever since, that I have to have hope that this will work out. I will carry a baby one day.
It is such a beautiful sentiment. I never received anything like that from doctors or specialists. I often found them to be quite matter of fact in terms of, well, you're healthy, there's nothing wrong with you, you can fall pregnant easily. And I was always like, that's great, but that doesn't help me have a baby if I then lose the baby.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's so much of trying to conceive that is an element of control. I can control charting, I can control my diet, I can control, well, to an extent, your stress levels. But there's so much around infertility and pregnancy loss that is a lack of control. So just being told something as wishy-washy as this is bad luck is so unhelpful. And I know that lots of women in this community feel the same and are told the same on a daily basis. And frankly, it's not acceptable. I don't really know if it's bad luck is an acceptable statement in the medical world. I don't really know. But yeah, I then went on to have 3 months of not trying. I wanted to really give myself some space to grieve and recover from the trauma of the ectopic pregnancy. Started to try again in September, fell pregnant straight away. And this time it felt different. It felt, everything was okay. I felt really pregnant. I was experiencing morning sickness. My boobs were hurting all the time. I was exhausted. I started to experience some very light spotting around 7 weeks. And without even a shadow of a doubt, I took myself straight to our early pregnancy unit and was extremely clear in the fact that I wanted a scan. I wanted to make sure everything was okay. This is my history, and I'm not leaving until I've had a scan. and thankfully, I got my scan, and for the first time, I saw the baby. I saw a heartbeat, and it was amazing. And it was just like, God, this is it. It's going to be okay. This is like the first milestone I've ever hit, and everything's going to be okay. It's there. There's a heartbeat. I feel rubbish. As long as I feel rubbish, then it's all good. And the hospital at the time sent me home and they said, look, we want you to come back in a week just so we can keep an eye on this spotting. They reassured me that early pregnancy spotting can be very normal. They just wanted to keep an eye on it. So about a week later, I went back and there was no heartbeat. And that really, really shocked me because I really wasn't expecting it. I had really let myself settle into the pregnancy in that week. I'd looked at the little scan photo every day, and that was really, really, really awful. And what was interesting about that experience and that loss was I was completely numb for probably about a week. I quite literally wasn't able to speak. I didn't cry. I was in a complete state of shock, which now I know is a very common experience for people that have been through repeated trauma. And it wasn't really until after my D&C that I was able to begin the grieving period, the endless crying, the many, many hours spent in bed. And that's where I am now. That was November. Obviously, now it's the end of February. I'm a few months on. And despite the tears that have shed here today, I'm actually doing a lot better. I'm in a much, much better place.
It is amazing that you're able to talk about it this soon in essentially a public forum. Like, I understand it's only the two of us here at the moment. But that is incredible. I think you need to give yourself some credit here. Like, you've had 3 incredibly painful losses, and all very different too. Like, it wasn't the same thing each time. So you were in each one in a new situation. I think that third one of seeing the heartbeat, and then I know that feeling. I know settling in. I know that, okay, it's going to be okay. It's different. You talk yourself into all the symptoms are different. And then to be blindsided by that next ultrasound and there's no heartbeat. I know that feeling too well. So I think the fact that only a few months on you're able to talk about it is really incredible. I'd love to know what healing looks like for you at the moment, and maybe what it looked like after the ectopic as well. Are you doing anything actively that you would say, this is obviously talking about it here today is a part of that, but what else are you doing?
Yeah, so I think a large part of my healing journey has been around this sentiment of hope. And for me, I think before you can even get yourself in a mindset of having hope, you can't move to that phase until you have acknowledged how awful this is and accepted how painful this is. And until you've felt all of those distressing emotions, sadness, grief, anger, jealousy, you can't move on to the easier side. So for me, after the ectopic pregnancy and after my most recent loss, I allowed myself as much time as I needed to feel all of those ugly feelings, because it does no good to try and squash them. They will creep up, and that's just the reality. They'll creep up whenever, sometimes when you're not even expecting it, and sometimes when you think you're feeling fine and I'm finally over this, they'll still rear their ugly head. But it's really important that you give those ugly feelings as much space as possible. But then hope does just appear, and I think hope lies in all of us. And I've built in some coping mechanisms and some daily rituals that have helped me have this huge sentiment of hope in amongst all of this sadness. And I think for me, it's small things. So doing yoga practice, even if it is once a week, 3 times a week, that dedicated practice of being on the mat for myself, for my health, for my well-being is self-care. And in of itself, self-care helps you recover, no matter how small it is. You know, it could be doing a yoga practice, it could be washing my hair, it could be getting my nails done, something as small as that. Self-care and moving my body have been a big, big part of my personal recovery. And I have silly little personal rituals that I do. I have a small bracelet that I wear that has the word hope written on it. And every morning when I put it on, and every evening, I can take a moment and I can look down and remember why I'm here, what my sentiments are, what my purpose is, and really what I'm hoping for, which is, of course, a healthy pregnancy and a baby. Yeah, for me, it's building in those daily rituals that kind of commit to bringing more positivity and bringing more hope to my life.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that you can feel hope and you can feel those ugly feelings all at the same time.
Oh, for sure.
And that you'll flick back and forth between them. Because I think sometimes we think, oh, we've got to be all this positivity and all this hopeful. Like, if somehow we think the bad feelings, then it's going to like impact us some way. But I think it's worse if we try and like do everything perfectly and
definitely
stay on this positive mindset all the time, because inevitably when you're struggling with anything, those ugly feelings are going to come up. And if we keep pushing them down, they just kind of get bigger. Hey.
Definitely. I mean, I had a conversation with my therapist about this. And again, therapy is something that I invested in this time round. I said to her, you know, how will I ever be able to cope with the anxiety of having a scan again? Every scan I've had has always come with bad news. And even just the thought of going into that room, seeing the sonographer, even thinking about it now, it triggers me into a state of anxiety. And she said, Izzy, no one's telling you that you have to cope with that experience. Yes. Of course, you're going to find that experience traumatic. because your brain has been here before and it's associating it with an extremely sad and traumatic event. So whenever you do come around to having your next scan, hopefully in the next pregnancy and hopefully a healthy pregnancy, just lie with that emotion. Acknowledge that you feel terrified, acknowledge that you feel riddled with anxiety, and just let it be present with you. Don't try and ignore it or squash it or convince everyone in the room that you're excited, because that's not the reality. Of course, you're going to be scared. And I thought, actually, that's such a relief. Rather than trying to make it this positive experience, it's more of a burden, actually, to try and make it a positive experience. Why can't I just accept that this is terrifying?
Other than that comment from that amazing specialist who said about staying hopeful, what do you think has been most helpful for you?
I think for me, having hope comes from remembering and reflecting on different chapters in your life where things have gone wrong and you've been tested and maybe you've grieved and you've been stressed, and reflecting that actually things do always work out. Even if it's not the journey that you thought you'd take, the universe is actually always in your favor and there is always a greater plan ahead of you. And sometimes we don't know why we're being tested, and it certainly isn't fair. It's definitely not fair. But for me, it's been really helpful to reflect back on, obviously, do you remember when you got rejected from that dream job and you were devastated? But actually, a couple of months later, an even better job with a better income came up, and that was amazing. And it's the same if you've ever had your heart broken, but then, you do find love again. For me, it's been reflecting on those previous challenging chapters in my life and realizing that everything does always work out, and finding that faith in the universe or whatever greater being somebody chooses to believe in, things do always work out. And again, I'll use a reference that my therapist gave me, which is that perhaps all of this experience that I've been through in the past year is making me a more resilient, stronger woman. That in of itself is preparing me for motherhood. So when I do come round to holding a baby in my arms, I will be best, strongest, most resilient version of myself. And I will be ready for all of the stresses that motherhood presents me. Maybe not all of them, but I'll be a thicker skinned person. And I think for me, it's exactly that. It's reflecting on, hey, I've been in tough situations before, but everything works out. And whilst this isn't fair and I don't deserve to be here, something really, really, really great is just around the corner.
Yeah, I love that. That's so beautiful. And especially when you look back at all the things you've already been through, and possibly, especially for heartbreak, we sometimes think, I'm not strong enough to get through this. I don't know how I'm ever going to survive. And little by little, we get through it. And the same thing is true for loss. You feel like, I am never going to get through this.
Yeah.
And little by little, you do, because
Yeah.
that strength is there. We just aren't always tested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where to now, Izzy? Where are you up to?
I've got a couple of tests coming up, some final bits that I haven't been tested for before. I think I mentioned that I've been given pretty much the all clear from every doctor that I've seen, you're healthy as anything, continue. A couple of tests lined up, and then I think in spring we're going to start trying again. This break that we've had has been very much needed, and I think maybe from hearing snippets of your own journey, Bettina, you took a similar path where eventually you just had quite a longer break after your last loss. And I think your brain tells you see the warning signs that's just like, no, I need to not obsessively take my temperature every morning. I need to not obsessively take ovulation tests. I need to just chill out and just forget Izzy that's trying to become a mum, and just remember that I'm Izzy that's a wife and a sister and a daughter and a friend, and just reconnect with that. Past couple of months has been incredibly helpful for my healing journey. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm just taking a little bit longer. Come springtime, we will start trying again, and fingers crossed, it's our time.
Yeah. You seem to be in a really good place, like to be able to recognize that you can go back into it without going back into it in a way that consumes your life is pretty powerful.
I think so. I was reflecting on one thing that has always stood really, really true to me throughout all of my 3 losses, no matter how desperately sad I've been, low, jealous, whatever the ugly feeling might be. I've always known that I will be a mum one day. And I've never, ever lost sight of that God knows why I'm on this journey, but it doesn't matter, because one day I will have hopefully a brood of children around me, and I'll be able to reflect that the journey wasn't easy, but I got here, and that's really, really stood close to me that it will happen.
Yeah, you got to hold on to that hope, hey?
You do.
Well, I can't wait to talk to you maybe one day in the future, and it'll be a different story we'll be sharing.
Oh, yes. I'm hoping the next time I chat to you, Bettina, I'll be able to say either I have a baby in my arms or I'm happily pregnant and desperate for it to come out, or something lovely like that.
Yes, that would be lovely. You mentioned that you have been talking to a therapist. I just want to remind you, and you probably already know this because you are seeing someone, but talking about it in this way, start to finish, it might bring up some things for you today. So I know you're going back to work after this, which is super tricky. But just if you are sort of feeling a little bit off later this afternoon or tonight, make sure you either reach out to me, reach out to your therapist, talk to your husband, talk to your mum, just really look after you, because it can kind of stir everything up again and sort of put you in an uneasy sort of place. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. I think, you can bumble along for days not crying about a pregnancy loss, but it's always there, isn't it? The grief is always there. And I'm sure you know that as well. But I know that from chatting about these things, it can resurface some not nice feelings. So thank you.
It was so lovely to talk to you. And I cannot wait to share this. I think I can talk about it forever, but being able to hear other people's stories from all around the world as well, like I think that's going to be really powerful, is hearing how women are treated in different systems, because I think we're quite similar, but there are, I know, other countries in the world where it is treated very differently. And even also hearing the commonalities is helpful too, to be like, yes, I felt like that as well. So thank you so much for talking to me.
And sorry for being so teary. I promise ordinarily I'm quite a jolly person. I'm not crying all the time.
Absolutely no need to apologize. Have you watched any of my videos? I cry all the time.
I know. I know, this is a safe space. I appreciate it.
All right. I'll see you later, Izzy. Thanks so much for talking.
Thank you so much.